from the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg campus. And St. Petersburg, I'm Bob Rorlach with the Tampa Bay Chamber. We want to thank you all for being with us today, and we're here for the St. Petersburg Mayoral debate presented by the Tampa Bay Chamber in partnership with WFLA. The Tampa Bay Chamber focuses on policy, not politics. We think it's important that the voters be informed during our elections, and we work closely with our elected officials as they serve our communities throughout the region. Today we're going to hear from two candidates for mayor of St. Petersburg, and we hope that you will be closely listening and participating as we learn more about their positions in this election this year. We want to thank the candidates for their time. We appreciate them being here with us, and thank you to USF St. Petersburg for being here with us and hosting this event tonight. A huge thank you to WFLA for live streaming the event tonight and for working with us to publicize this regional conversation that will have an impact throughout our region in the future. And finally, thank you to our audience throughout Tampa Bay and throughout the entire region and the state of Florida for watching tonight's debate. Your interest and support for an informed political process is critical to the future and the success of our great region. And now I would like to introduce our moderator to the stage, who will then introduce and welcome the candidates. Our moderator this evening will be Evan Donovan. Evan is a political anchor and reporter at WFLA. He anchors News Channel 8 Today on the weekend mornings, and he also hosts the Sunday morning political show Battleground Florida. Please join me in welcoming Evan Donovan. Evan?
Thank you very much, Bob. I'd like to give a big thank you to the Tampa Bay Chamber. And Bob, I appreciate you inviting me to participate tonight as moderator. I love this community, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to inform our neighbors as they shape the type of city they want in the future with the selection of its new leader. I'd like to start by introducing our candidates here with us tonight. Councilman Robert Blackman represents District 1 on the St. Petersburg City Council. Professionally, he is a real estate investor. He is also a native of St. Pete and a graduate of Florida State University. Please welcome Robert to the stage. Former Pinellas County Commissioner Ken Welch served on the commission, first elected in 2000, retiring in November of last year. He received his undergraduate degree from the University of South Florida, an MBA from Florida A&M, also a native of this area. Please welcome Commissioner Ken Welch.
Good to see you.
Here is the format for tonight's debate. We will begin with 3 minutes each for candidate introductions. After that, I will begin asking questions based around the Tampa Bay Chamber of Commerce's 7 key issue initiatives. We can go ahead and have a seat. Candidates will have 90 seconds for responses to questions posed by myself, and if necessary, 30 seconds for rebuttal, especially if you or your policy initiative is mentioned by name. We begin with 3 minutes for each candidate introduction. We did not have a coin to flip, so let's begin with you, Robert.
Sounds good. Just go into an opening?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Robert Blackmon, current city council member, lifelong St. Pete resident. I've worked my entire career to make St. Pete a better place. In my private career, I've renovated dilapidated and forlorn homes and buildings in our community to try and make things better for our city. In my public career, I've done exactly that. And I've been on the council now for 2 years, fighting for innovation and pushing to make our city better. And why would I run for the office of mayor? It's because St. Pete has been my entire life. It's been my family's entire life. On my mother's side, I'm 4th generation. On my father's side, I'm 3rd generation. So this is a very personal thing for me. It's a job that I want to undertake not because I view public service as a career, because I certainly do not, but I view it exactly as that, a service. And although it's not a career, it's an important job. You know, I've foregone 6 years potentially on the council to run for mayor, and that's because I believe in the power of now and the power of change. There's so many common sense ideas we can undertake to bring our city forward. And I really hope that the viewers will listen to who is putting forward the best policy initiatives to take our city to the next generation, the next level. I have answers on environmental issues. I have answers and plans for how to combat climate change. I have answers for how to combat some of the red tide damage that's been done. Economic opportunity for Midtown, my former neighborhood. I have plans for that too. Meaningful change. How we can also bring about scientific learning by working together with our partners at different governmental agencies. I have plans for Tropicana Fields redevelopment that will be equitable and will bring economic growth to our city. I have ways to bring affordable housing with the city-backed mortgage program. All of these plans I have, and I've been fighting on the council, and I want to take it to the next level. I don't rest on my laurels, although I think I have done a lot in my career. But I always want to keep pushing St. Pete forward to the next level because it is my home. St. Pete has been my life. And the success of St. Petersburg is the success of me and my family. And I want to make sure that everybody shares in the growth that we've experienced and that we have true equitable growth. They say that a rising tide lifts all boats, and that's not necessarily always true. Sometimes people get drowned in that rising tide, and we need to make sure that everybody has a place and a seat on the boat so that we can all share in the success of St. Petersburg. No matter who you are, that's what St. Pete for All means, and that's my platform. Thank you very much.
Robert, thank you. Commissioner Welch.
Evan, good evening. Robert, good to see you again. I'm glad you didn't flip a coin because I haven't won one yet, so I finally get to go second. I want to thank WFLA and the Tampa Bay Chamber and USF for putting this forum on. I'm a third-generation St. Pete native. I grew up here, went to Melrose, Bay Point Elementary, and the Lakewood High School, and then graduated from USF St. Pete and went on to Florida A&M and received my master's in business administration from the School of Business Administration at Florida A&M. And I was actually hired in Tallahassee to come back home to Florida Power and started a corporate career there that spanned more than 20 years, leading change in accounting and finance and technology at some of our largest corporations, Florida Power, Raymond James, and St. Petersburg College, where I worked as a trustee and also as an associate vice president. I also worked in family businesses. My grandfather's woodyard was literally at I-175, 488 16th Street, and his woodyard was moved when the interstate came in. And a few blocks north was our family church in the gas plant area, along with many other churches, businesses, and almost 1,000 people. And I experienced that entire community being displaced in the name of progress. And now, 35 years later, I'm very interested in making sure those promises come to fruition. When I was growing up here as a boy, my main concern was that this would be a place that my kids would want to come back to one day. We were known as God's waiting room. And that has changed. We now have the hottest downtown in the Southeast, a lot of new growth, a lot of new development. My concern is that that growth is actually translated into real progress for everyone. And the theme of my campaign is inclusive progress. That means that everyone in every neighborhood feels that they are part of the progress in our community and not that they're being displaced by the progress in our community. As I've talked to neighbors and neighborhood associations and literally driven 1,000 Uber rides around our city to hear directly from the people, what I hear about is pretty consistent. Folks are concerned about affordability, they're concerned about their neighborhoods being safe and healthy, and they're concerned that we're making the proper investments in our infrastructure so that we can keep up with our growth and that we can be ready for the reality of sea level rise and climate change. What I bring to the table is not only that corporate experience, that family business experience, 20 years of governance in county government, but accomplishments, solid accomplishments that you can see: housing, justice reform, the first community redevelopment area aimed at poverty reduction in our county. It's a track record that I'll bring to the mayorship, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Just to make sure you both know what the signals are, Mr. Glover here will be putting up the yellow board when you have 30 seconds left in your response. The red one is when you have 10 seconds left, and if he starts waving it frantically, then you know it's time to stop talking. We begin with pretty much every chamber's primary initiative, business and economic development. The Rays were absolutely hosed last night by a terrible baseball rule, but I know we all have high hopes for Game 4 here tonight. However, underlying this year's playoff run in the back of fans' minds is the future of the team. On Friday, we learned a representative of the Rays reached out to Florida Senate President Wilton Simpson about help with infrastructure costs around a new stadium, possibly in Ybor City. Robert, I'll start with you. Do you think at this point there is any real chance of keeping the team in St. Petersburg, or should the new mayor shift focus to keeping the team in Tampa Bay by supporting a stadium move to Ybor City?
Well, first and foremost, I think Ken and I can both certainly agree that was a terrible call. No matter what else in this debate, I think we agree with that. As far as the stadium and the future of it and what the plans would be, I still want to focus on St. Petersburg. We're both running for mayor of St. Pete. We're not running for mayor of Tampa Bay or Tampa. That being said, I need to look at the harsh realities that are constantly evolving on the site. That site is the future of economic development for our city. It is where we can put hotel space. It is where we can put office space. We haven't had an office tower built in downtown St. Pete in my lifetime. 1986 was the last office tower that was built. So certainly there's many different uses and goals we can have with that site. That being said, I still hold out hope that we can have the Rays have a shared stadium between the Rowdies, which they own soccer team, and the Rays on the east end of the site. But as information continues to come out, I'm losing hopes on that. I'm seeing that Jane Castor is putting out a plan and says they want them in Tampa. I'm seeing they announced the Ybor City Stadium site. And then I'm seeing that, my opponent says all the time baseball is secondary, and then has gotten a $50,000 donation from the Rays just last week. It's tough for me. I want to make sure they stay in St. Pete. Certainly that's my goal, but I'm losing hope as I see the cards stacking up against it.
Ken, you told me in August that you supported the split city plan that the team had announced with Montreal. How do you plan to press Rays management to stay here full-time while not pressing too hard to risk losing them altogether?
Well, obviously, as Robert pointed out, I have been in contact with the Rays over an extended period, and that relationship matters. As a county commissioner, I led the effort to increase our bed tax that visitors pay by 1 penny so we would have an extra funding source to fund a new Rays stadium. In fact, the fact that the county owns the Trop was the result of an initiative I led when that became taxable to the citizens of St. Pete, and that's why the county took it over. I absolutely think that we can keep the Rays in St. Petersburg. Secondary, if we can't keep them, then certainly Tampa Bay is the next option. But look, I have said it's secondary because, as I said in the opening, I'm a child of the gas plant. The original promise was jobs and equitable economic development. That's my priority. But I absolutely believe that the Rays can be a part of that either at the Trop site or at Al-Lang Field. We've got the funding source, we've got the partnership with the county commission. 5 county commissioners have endorsed my campaign. And I've opened up the dialogue again with the city council. 5 current city council members have endorsed me as well. So we've got to restart that communication between the mayor's office, the Rays, the city council, and the county. That has already started. And I also, am I over time? I should have been looking at you, okay. I also supported the Rays looking in Tampa for 3 years because I know that we stack up well with our funding source, with our partnership, and I'm willing to let them look in Tampa and then make a decision.
Let me ask you a follow-up question there. You said last week, and Robert just pointed out, that the Rays are donating $50,000 to your campaign. How do voters trust that that money won't influence you to let them do what they want to do?
Well, I didn't say they donated that amount. I don't know where that amount came from. We didn't disclose that until today when we were required to. But look, that's the same amount that the Rays donated to Mayor Kreisman years ago. If you look at all of the developers, the folks who are interested in government who donate, they all have some interest. But I told the Rays the same thing that I told you. The priority is the jobs and the equitable development, and it has to be a fair deal to the city of St. Pete and the taxpayers. Look, we've already said goodbye one time and allowed them to look in Tampa. Now is our second turn it bad. And I think we can make that come to fruition.
Robert, you mentioned that there hasn't been anything built on that site since 1986. What are your plans should the team move for that site, and what is your vision there?
So to be clear, I was saying there hadn't been any downtown office towers, but that's true. That's about when construction started. I believe it is when it started. My plan would be civic value. Be it baseball or not, at the end of the day, what we want is we want civic value for our citizens. We can't control the private business dealings of a private entity. So what I'd like to see is I'd like to see job creation. First and foremost, the lowest hanging fruit there is hotel space. You know, right now, if you look at the hotel occupancy rate in our city the last 10 years, it's over 90%. We had hotels coming online when COVID hit, but the financing fell out nationwide because you just was not a reliable funding source for it when you have super low occupancy rates. We've rebounded astonishingly, and what we need to do is we need to focus on hotels to be able to bring more people in here. But at the same time, that's a tourism-based economy. We want to diversify into tech-based, financial-based, and smart growth jobs. In that vein, what we can do is we can put in office towers. We can have an exciting redevelopment opportunity with increased density. But this can have everything. We have market rate housing, we can have affordable housing. Because we can be smart with our densities on a site that is really underutilized, but at the time the land was was not worth that much. But at the end of the day, look to me, please, for these redevelopments, because I've fought on council, and Ken Welch and his father have had 40 years to develop that site and to choose its path forward. It's time for new leadership.
Ken, I'll give you a chance, 30 seconds to rebut.
Well, I get a full answer
Specifically to what he just said before.
Oh, well, you know, Robert said a number of outrageous things over the years, and so that's just another one. My father was not only reelected twice after the gas plant issue, but after sitting out 4 years for term limits, he was still reelected. So the people know that my father was a great public servant, and that's just more outrageous comments from Robert.
Let me ask you specifically, your family is one who had property uprooted to make room for that stadium. You've talked about how this whole ordeal has never lived up to, quote, the original promise of shared benefit and prosperity for the entire community. Can you expand upon that and specify your plans for what you would do at that site?
Yeah, we'll just continue that train of thought. When this was brought forward, my father was on the city council, and his question was, why is the African American community always asked to pay the price for progress? So the first time was the interstate when his dad was relocated. Second time was the pursuit of baseball. And so he believed the folks at their word that the jobs and the equitable development would come. And to his dying day, he said that promise has to be fulfilled. So I've lived that, I've seen that, and that's why something like the Community Benefits Agreement, which says that some amount of reinvestment in the community will come when there's a new development that has city investment in it, that should have passed right out of the bat, and that stalled in council, and I wrote a couple letters in supporting that. Going forward, we have to have equitable development. The Kreisman administration did a great job in laying out the RFP with 21 principles, including recognition of the history of the gas plant, but also affordable housing, also inclusive contracting and hiring. All those things are built in. So I think they did a really good job of laying the groundwork, and now we have to decide and move forward.
Robert, you mentioned diversifying the economy here in St. Pete so it's not so tourism-based, and you specifically mentioned tech. Let me just follow up on that. What would be your plans to woo tech businesses to the St. Pete area?
Well, first and foremost, back to the previous question, the CBA is something I fought for on council, and yes, I did scrutinize it, because that's the job of a public official, is not to blindly vote for something, but to make sure it's fully vetted and that everybody really benefits throughout our city. And I was proud to question it and then support it. And as far as tech-based jobs, I've been working already to try and bring smart, tech-based, diversified jobs to our community. You know, when Bayfront, that whole deal for Orlando Health to buy the hospital was on the rocks, I reached out personally to the CEO of Orlando Health and asked them to please reconsider their stance and come back to the table. We were ultimately successful, and now Orlando Health operates Bayfront Hospital. As far as tech-based, I've had great communications already with Kathy Wood of ARC Investments. We've been talking for months on that, and that's a huge coup for our community. Obviously, Dynasty Financial, that was not me, but I have had communications with all of these people, and I see the value in trying to diversify our economy. You know, we don't have the large landmass like certain areas where you can build large-scale manufacture. We have to be smart, we have to be strategic about where we get good paying jobs from. And it's all going to be tech-based, which is why I fought for the renovation of the Science Center, despite objections from some, to try and bring tech learning and education to all of our citizens and our children to put them on the right track to success.
Ken, do you similarly see a diversification of St. Pete's economy, and how would you plan to achieve that goal?
We've been working towards that end for some time. So the Innovation Center was actually a county project that I helped to lead before I left the county. And so what we need to do to draw tech is do the basics, the fundamentals right. And Robert, you talk about, doing your due diligence. Well, the Science Center hasn't even had a feasibility study. And that came to the county through CareerSource, through some really inappropriate means. And so I've seen all the issues with that building. So that's inconsistent. What we have to do is make sure we've got the infrastructure right, make sure we have the right climate to attract business. And that's why ARC came, because St. Pete has a great climate for business. We do have some shortcomings, though. We don't have transportation. If you move here and you're not in downtown or within walking or scooting distance, you'll probably have to own a car. That's where Tampa Bay is behind every other metro, both Tampa and St. Petersburg. So we got to get our transportation up to speed, but we've got all the other parts of what we need: a welcoming climate, low taxes, and government that basically does the infrastructure well. Having worked in family businesses for a long time, I know all we need is for government to make the trains run on time, clean water at the tap, make sure the streets are safe, and then private sector can do what it does best.
Robert, I'll give you 30 seconds to rebut.
Yeah, as far as the Science Center, exactly that. I've reached out to the federal government and the state government. I've gotten more in funding to renovate it than we paid for the facility. As far as the Innovation Center, it still is a shortfall. Even though the county was supposed to fund it, expenses went up, which is not responsible. We're working on a feasibility study right now for the Science Center after I've already achieved the money. But again, you look at stuff like you said, the Science Center came to the county. Why would you do more of the same when there's been failures on these projects? Why would you trust somebody who's involved in those shortcomings?
I want to move on now. One of the Chamber's other priorities is engaging, training, and retaining young professionals. Senator Jeff Brandes of here in Pinellas County has introduced a bill to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot that would allow employers to pay a training wage temporarily that is below what would be the new state's mandatory minimum wage for up to 6 months. Given that the state's phased-in $15 minimum wage is likely to push other wages up, particularly on the low end of the scale, particularly for young people as well, would you support that measure, Robert? And how do you plan to specifically recruit young professionals to St. Pete, given they will likely cost employers more to hire as we move forward towards 2026?
Right. Well, everybody deserves to make a living wage. To that end, we had a discussion for contract employees, I believe 3 weeks ago at council, and we were talking about raising wages from $14.20 to maybe $14.70. I said, let's go all the way to 15 or higher, because I know the market as an employer, and you can't get employees for these prices. Market is going to dictate. Obviously, there's a real shortage right now of labor nationwide, and St. Pete's no exception. And I'm happy that wages are going up and that people are getting living wages to support their families. Certainly, I support any measure focused on economic opportunity. And when we want to attract millennials and young people to our area, just look at the quality of life. We are a developing metropolis here that has it all. We have a great tax structure. We have a great quality of life. We have natural resources, a wonderful climate. We're the Sunshine City. So come on down, check out our museums, grab a beer at a brewery. I'll meet you out there, and please come to St. Pete.
Let me go ahead and follow up with you there, though, with specific regard to Brandes' bill. Should it make it through the legislative process and come on the ballot next November, would you vote for that?
Well, if it makes it that far, we'll see. I honestly haven't looked that much into it because I'm so singularly focused on local issues. That being said, like I said, the free market is going to dictate pricing, and certainly it's hard to hire even at 15 these days.
Ken, same question for you. Would you support that constitutional amendment? Should it make it on the ballot? And how do you plan to specifically recruit young professionals to St. Pete?
Well, I've been supporting living wages for some time. A few years ago, I put forward an initiative to move all county employees, both under the administrator and all county offices, to $12.50 an hour. That was a few years ago. Now we're all at $15 an hour. I think you need to get to that basic living wage of 15. Folks here already pay a disproportionate amount of their salary for transportation and housing. And then if on top of that you're not paying a living wage, then we're in a bad position compared to other metros. So I would like us to get to 15. And the way you attract folks is, again, having that business climate, having a welcoming environment, making sure you have transportation options, multimodal options, because that's what folks expect when they come from other parts of the nation and they come here and they're like, the buses stop running at 9 o'clock. It takes an hour for a bus to get here. We've really got to upgrade what we're doing with transportation as a fundamental part of our infrastructure. But all the other quality of life issues matter as well. I think when companies look, they look to our education system, they look to our neighborhood safety, and they look to our inclusivity as a community.
Let's discuss climate. This area has not been hit directly by a hurricane in 100 years, but by all accounts, when it does happen, it would be catastrophic for the region and specifically for St. Petersburg and Pinellas County. Climate change is one of those topics everyone talks about, but it doesn't seem to get much specific action, particularly on a local level. I'll start with you, Ken. How important would this be in your administration if you win?
It's vitally important. As a member of the Florida Association of Counties, I've worked with commissioners all over the state of Florida under the leadership of Janet Long, a fellow commissioner. We have started a climate compact in Tampa Bay similar to what Southeast Florida has. It basically means we're going to listen to the science, and our capital improvement programs, our infrastructure programs are all going to be informed by what the science is saying. And the science is predicting a significant amount of sea level rise over the next 20, 40, 50 years. And so whether it's a new bridge that we're building or where we're allowing density, it has to factor all those things in. And we're already well down the road to making sure that's part of all of our processes going forward. And so listening to the science, making sure that's integrated with your plans is the way I'll approach that. The other thing I'll do is fund and implement the integrated sustainability action plan that the city has in place, but they haven't activated it. And I've spoken to many staff members and folks in the community as well. For example, there's been no energy assessment of the city facilities, although it's been planned. That's one of the first things that we should do. So I'm going to bring focus to that and make sure that we are actually walking the talk on climate change and sustainability.
How much interaction with City Council do you need to implement those measures?
Well, I have always been collaborative, and I think it's telling that after several terms on the commission, 5 commissioners have endorsed me because we work well together. I've already reached out to every city council member. I met with Robert before he declared. I've met with several of the candidates. There will be a two-way communication with council because I view this as a partnership, and that's the way we've gotten big things done in this county, starting the first housing trust fund that's put more than 4,000 units of affordable apartments on the ground and another 4,000 home ownership homes on the ground. That was a partnership between county, city, realtors, the community, and now we're benefiting from that. Same thing with the community development area. My way of work is communicative, it's collaborative, and that will be the same case with council as well.
Robert, same question for you. How important would this be to a Blackman administration should you win?
Well, we're a coastal area, so it's of utmost importance, any change in climate. First of all, sea level rise, but also quality of our environment, because we are so impacted still. We've talked earlier about diversifying our economy, but we are still predominantly a service and tourism-based economy. That's based on environmental science and environmental conditions. I'm a former member of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program board, but what I've done in my private career and public career is I've fought for smart, low-hanging fruit to try and move us forward. First of all, obviously the Science Center. We need to teach kids the importance of leading with science, and we need to educate them from a young age so that people from St. Pete can solve St. Pete issues and make a living wage doing it. But also, we can be smart and benefit our taxpayers with environmental initiatives. Stuff that I've pushed for, like oyster gardens. You can have oyster domes, which will break wave activity, but also vertical oyster gardens. I want to implement a program where we'll install them like we do rain barrels underneath docks. A healthy oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water a day. Impacts like that can help prolong the life of our seawalls if we buffer them with that, because our seawalls right now, we are very deficient in our funding long term to preserve them. But also stuff like the coastal high hazard area. I fought to allow changes to the density in coastal high hazard areas because that would mean storm hardening for buildings and new builds, which we need desperately with windows, roofs, tie downs. We need it all, so absolutely.
Follow-up question for you. How much buy-in and cooperation do you need from City Council to enact those measures?
Well, if I ever was questioning the amount of buy-in you need and participation from council, I've been a council member and I've seen what can happen. And you can have a project go off the rails really quickly if you have a council that doesn't feel like they've been cut in. Coastal high hazard was a big one. We went back and forth a lot on that, but we ultimately determined that we need more storm hardening. And I would push towards that end because, we need to look at being frugal and fiscally responsible. Impact hurricane windows certainly can minimize the damage to a home, but they also provide energy efficiency benefits in the interim because they don't allow as much seepage, which is also good for our environment long term because it allows less usage of energy and it saves people money. So we need to try and message this, but also look towards funding sources to push for storm hardening measures and eco-friendly measures.
I want to move on now to one of the Chamber's other key issues, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there are several past incidents that I'd like each of you to address. Ken, in 2008, you supported a religious exemption to the county's human rights ordinances to protect LGBTQ people. The Tampa Bay Times reported that you wrote in a 1995 letter to the editor that you stood with the Bible in opposition to homosexuality and abortion. And last year, you referred to former St. Pete Mayor Rick Baker as Massa in a text message among Black elected officials. How should voters judge you on these comments now?
Well, first of all, those comments aren't accurate. So I did not say I was opposed to homosexuality and abortion. It was a response to an article about the Promise Keepers, which was a convention that Tony Dungy was a part of. And my response said when I attended that, I didn't hear any reference to homosexuality and abortion. So that question is not correct. But the bottom line is this.
You said previously, however, that you stood with the Bible and that was your view was in line with the Bible, correct?
No, you're not interpreting that correctly. So let me tell you what I do believe. So 30 years ago is almost the timetable that you're referencing that. Right after the discussion on the marketing program for the county, which would have segmented it into marketing towards the LGBT community, African American, and so forth. Right after my comments on that, the LGBT community started reaching out to me, and I started meeting with folks like Brian Longstreth and Stephen McHugh and listening to their lived experience. And they told me, well, this is why this is important, Ken. And so I listened, I learned. The very next year, I made the motion to add sexual orientation to the countywide human rights ordinance. A few years later, in 2013, when I was chair, in my first meeting, we started a domestic partnership registry. And then later on that year, we added transgender protections to our human rights ordinance. So my story is, in 25 or 30 years, I've learned a lot. I've become a very strong ally. I am a person of faith, but my faith is not based on hatred and never has been. So, that is my story. And that's why I'm endorsed by the Pinellas County Stonewall Democrats, by Equality Florida, and other folks who have actually worked with me and been with me on this journey and know where I stand.
Thank you, Ken. Robert, this summer, several Facebook posts from 2010 to 2012 surfaced in which an account under your name made disparaging comments about several groups. One post referred to a woman as a bitch, and another called 3 generations of women, including a 3-year-old sluts. In a statement, you said the comments were inappropriate, shameful, and embarrassing. You were in your early 20s when you made those comments. How should voters judge you on those comments now?
Well, you know exactly what you said. The past is the past, and we need to learn from it at all times. Did I make jokes? All the time. I mean, with your friends, when you're in your 20s, you're in college, you're having a good time. And none of that makes it all right. I could never find those on my Facebook, but I'll deem them all. I'm not going to at all try and make excuses for past behaviors because wrong is wrong now or then. And I own that, and I apologize for that. But I'm not going to do what my opponent just did and try and explain it away. because that was wrong then. All the actions he did, though, were when he was an elected official, fighting against rights, fighting against organizations and groups, penning op-eds to the paper saying black people are pawns of the Democratic Party. That's not right. I believe in the equality of all, and I am sorry for things I did long before I ever considered a career in politics. But when people have taken their platform and used it against groups to say they don't know where the transgendered community would use a bathroom, or would they disrupt a meeting, I think that rises to a completely different level of scrutiny from some young idiot writing dumb stuff on the internet.
You can for rebuttal. Let me just make sure. You said you couldn't find those on your Facebook page. Are you saying you did not make those comments?
I will just take them all at face value that I did. I can't find them, but I assume they're all to be legitimate.
Ken, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, 30 seconds isn't enough really to respond to that. But first of all, Robert, again, is wrong. The 1995 or 98 quote that you had was before I was ever a commissioner. The transgender issue, again, is Robert taking something out of context. When this came to the commission, one of the questions was, what do you do in a business when a transgender person wants to use the restroom? Do you need a family-type restroom? We were actually looking at the issue and trying to get to a solution, Robert. And so that's why I asked that question, how do you handle it? And then the LGBT community came and talked to me, well, here's how it can be handled, talked about how it's handled around the nation, and that's why a few years later, I added that to the county human rights ordinance. So it was not disparaging, it was asking the question, okay, if we do this, how do we handle it? And that's why I have the support of folks who walk with me through that journey. You weren't anywhere in the picture when we were trying to get these protections put in place. But the folks who walk with me, Equality Florida, the Stonewalls, know that that's the reason I was asking those questions.
30 seconds for rebuttal, Robert.
You know, again, we need to look at the records. Even in 1995, you were the same age I am now. So if we're going to talk about growth and the ability to grow throughout the years, you were in your mid-40s, 10 years into your tenure, when you were fighting against these protections. Have I said dumb stuff in my life? Absolutely. And I apologize for it. But look at my record as an elected official. I have always stood up for what I believed in. I've stood for the rights of all. I've gone to the Trans Day of Remembrance. I've marched in pride. I also want to wish everybody a happy National Coming Out Day, because I stand in solidarity with the LGBTQIA+ community. And I understand that we need to have rights for all, and that can benefit our entire community because our diversity is our strength.
I want to leave it there.
Can I just make a clarification? Because he made another comment that's incorrect. I never.
Yeah, I think we need to leave it there.
Well, it's incorrect because I didn't fight against those protections. I led those protections.
We're the sole vote against the marketing program.
I think you've both said your piece, and I think we should move on. In fact, I'm going to lighten it up here for a moment. I think we value our time here, obviously, in the Chamber's priorities, but I want people to get to know you as well. I'd like to just ask you sort of a personal question. Tell me your favorite memory of St. Pete as a child.
My favorite memory as a child. You know, it depends on what you consider childhood. My happiest days were at St. Pete High in high school. All of my friends I have today, I always say I made through St. Pete High because either friends from high school or through them I met friends of friends of friends. But truly, one of the memories I look back on the most is the wonderful summer camps we had in St. Petersburg, going to Boyd Hill and learning about nature, going to Pathfinders and learning about nature, going to Great Explorations and learning about robotics, going to the Museum of History and learning about the history of our city and how we got to where we are, and certainly the Science Center, which I absolutely resented being dumped at every summer by my parents on end because I figured I've already had a whole hard year's worth of work. Why be dumped here? But looking back, it was the greatest memories of my life. I learned so much about our environment, our economy, how to make the world a better place, and also I got to meet a lot of great people who are friends to my day and some of my earliest supporters of this campaign.
Would you say that your experience there helped convince you that it need to invest in it?
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And that's how I was able to get Senator Roussan and Congressman Christ on board for the project, because they were both alumni also of the facility. So there's been a lot of good there. And if you look at the old articles, the first kind of group that went through there were employed by NASA. We're programming computers. We're helping to cure cancer. There's a lot of good to be done if we follow science in our community.
Ken, same question for you. Your favorite memory as a child around here?
There are really too many to name. Starting at, working in my grandfather's wood yard as a boy, learning how to swing an axe, learning. The first time someone gave me a tip, I didn't know what to do, and Grant said, "Yeah, you can take the tip. That means you did a good job." But growing up, the last year of segregation, I attended Melrose Elementary. And then the next year, we were the first integrated classes at Bay Point. And so my whole middle school and high school were folks who hadn't been in the same communities before. Busing was active, but the friends, the memories I made, playing in band under Roger Green at Bay Point and under Bill Findyson at Lakewood, playing on the Mighty Spartans football team, 1980 champs. Those are friendships that last to this day. But it was folks connecting in ways they hadn't because we were coming out of segregation. And so that whole period to me is important and still, lessons learned.
And thank you for the. Let's move on now to workforce housing, one of the other key issues for the Chamber. Perhaps the biggest issue facing St. Petersburg today, affordable housing. Robert, you have touted your family business as providing more affordable housing options throughout the city. You mentioned it in your opening statement. There was this summer 3 eviction notices filed at Paradise Apartments within weeks of you buying the property. Those were later dropped after several protests. A representative from the St. Petersburg Tenants Union said you were buying up properties and charging more for them, contributing to gentrification. How do you balance your right as a property owner to seek a profit with keeping rent affordable for residents in the city?
Are we going to have a chance to address affordable housing other than this later in the debate? Okay, so I'll answer those questions. And my private business model has been always to take an asset that has been forlorn or a blight to the community with substandard conditions and make it better. Those apartments were no different. None of those tenants were evicted, but they were non-communicative. And you sometimes have to go in there and be able to get a partnership going to make things better. I've invested nearly $50,000 in that building already. It's been a matter of months. Was over there on Friday myself checking a plumbing leak. So certainly I've always made things better. I've renovated over 250 units in our city in my career. I've lived in all of my projects in the past. My place at 17th Street and 13th Avenue South, that place had been abandoned for 12 years before I purchased it. It had the doors stolen from metal, the windows, the electrical, and you could see through the roof. It was condemned, and I renovated it and put in granite, stainless. And I rented that out in 2015 for $645 a month, central AC, the whole 9. If you're smart about a budget, you can always provide affordable housing from the private sector. That's how I've been able to do it, but I also bring that experience to the city of being a private business person, of trying to get the best deal, except for the company is the city of St. Petersburg. The mayor is the CEO, all the council members of the board of directors, and all the citizens are the shareholders. And all of the executives need to be accountable to the citizens.
Ken, your website says preserving what makes St. Pete great requires innovative and inclusive public-private collaborations. Give me a specific example of an initiative you would introduce as mayor to create more affordable housing.
Well, it'll be a continuation of what I worked on as a county commissioner. One of the issues I worked on in 2006 was creating the Housing Trust Fund. We had a countywide community housing task force that came together to look at the affordability of housing, and that helped create a housing trust fund that's been seeded with more than $100 million. In fact, buildings are still being built right in our vicinity with affordable housing to folks making $19 an hour and less. And so I'll continue that. I'll bring emphasis to that as well. I also led the homeless policy group, though, in 2006, and we created funding for Pinellas Hope with $500,000 in funding annually from the county to this day to help folks who are homeless and folks who are evicted find a path back through emergency shelter, but then also permanent supportive housing. And so right on 49th Street, there are more than 400 people. That's a public-private partnership between the county, the city, the Catholic Diocese. And then right up the road is Safe Harbor, which is for folks who are actively using drugs or substance abuse. They can go there instead of being arrested. So not only did we address homelessness and housing, but also justice reform by finding alternatives to arresting folks. that will continue to be a focus for my administration, will be a priority.
Robert, I want to follow up on that question and sort of lead into what you had just asked me. Because you manage properties, you sort of are in a specific place to perhaps come up with recommendations on how to create more affordable housing. What have you learned in your time as an investor, and what do you think needs to happen?
Well, there are so many different works that we can do as a city to bring about affordable housing, spur the development, but also bring about equity and economic growth for all. A bill, for example, that I've pushed on the state level this year, we were unsuccessful last year, but it would allow us to waive permit fees for affordable housing projects up to 100% from a pot of existing money that we have been mandated to burn down per state ordinance. I'm moving that forward this year. Again, I have great faith in its success. Other than that, though, sitting on the council, and I'm not saying these were bad ideas, but we have incentivized and subsidized affordable housing projects up to $70,000+ a unit. What I would like to do moving forward is I would like to institute a city-backed mortgage program, because there's plenty of condos between $50,000 and $125,000 in our city. The problem with a condo that's $100,000 is those who can afford it don't want to live there, and those who want to live there can't afford it. So what we can do is we can leverage our purchasing power as the city to buy these condos and then assign out mortgages. Taxpayers citywide win because every dollar that enters the affordable housing program will never leave that program. These mortgages will have to be paid back. But it'll allow those who are truly low income earners, those in the 40% AMI and less, to have equity, and they can ride that tide up as they're working. Their payments can be less than $750 a month because you can still buy some older housing stock for less than the price of new construction. And we need to make sure that everybody has skin in the game, especially those who are working to make our city special, and that they have equity for the town they're making grow, that they grow with it.
Let's shift now to workforce development and education. The 2020 Regional Competitiveness Report highlighted top 5 rates in Tampa Bay in job growth, business establishment starts, but we lag behind in median wages, household income, labor force participation, and educational attainment. 2 consulting reports in 2016 and 2020 highlighted a lack of a regional approach to workforce development as one of the area's weaknesses. County-level economic development, basically, rather than Tampa Bay as a whole. The 2020 report from Ernst & Young said the pandemic presents an opportunity as businesses start to look for leaving one-tier cities that are just encompassed by one larger city for regions like ours that have multiple successful cities. Let's start with you, Ken. How will you work with leaders in Tampa and the rest of the Bay Area to develop a coordinated approach, knowing that you also have to compete against them?
Well, I think you have to have partnerships and collaboration. As a county commissioner, I've worked with folks around the state, and I'm endorsed by Mayor Buckhorn, Mayor Castor, and many folks from the Hillsborough side, because we've worked together on issues like transportation and Tampa Bay Water and others. And so that partnership is already there. In terms of workforce specifically, there's so much need. I hear from employers all the time who can't fill their openings. And then on the other side, we've got so many young people who don't see a way to connect to opportunity. You know, I held 2 youth forums this summer in response to the violence that we're seeing. And what we heard from young people is, I don't see a way to connect to opportunity. And so what I want to do is to upgrade our community centers to empowerment and innovation centers, bring the technology, address the digital divide, have later operating hours so that kids can actually use that. I have an advisory council of educators, folks who have worked in the community, to connect young people to all of the possibilities that are out there. You can make a great living in a number of non-traditional employment, but also I think you've got to have wraparound services for those young people. A lot of young folks are homeless or hungry. You've got to address those issues before they can get into learning.
Robert, same question for you. How will you work with leaders in the area to develop a coordinated approach?
Well, you know, again, endorsements. I've been endorsed by Mayor Dick Greco of Tampa, Mayor of Treasure Island, Tyler Payne, Seminole Mayor Leslie Waters, and a plethora of others. But we need to have a regional approach, certainly. That being said, I don't want St. Pete to be the part of the region that gets left out. We need to make sure, I'm running for mayor of St. Pete, so I want to make sure that St. Pete is going to get its fair share. And there's different ways we can do that. For one, we can try and annex some unincorporated land to show what the value is to people. Their property values will go up. We get more clout when it comes to federal resources if we do that. There's Lellman, parts of Tierra Verde. Those are initiatives that my opponent has fought against in the past. But also what we need to look at is we do need to look at bringing a more tech-based and higher education-based system of jobs to our city. Because again, kind of the Band-Aid we've been using is all of these service industry jobs, which is great, but we have to diversify because if there's an economic downturn, guess what goes first? All that discretionary income. But certain things like healthcare, there's a complete inelastic demand. People are getting sick, people are getting older, people need healthcare, whether or not there's a good economy or a bad economy. So we need to make sure we're putting people towards these science and STEAM-based jobs.
For you were mentioned, Ken.
Yeah. The worst thing you could do is start annexing Lellman and Tierra Verde. You'll start a whole nother round of governments suing each other. I've seen that, and that's just a horrible idea. I've also served on the Career Education Board of the Education Foundation, and we've put career academies in most of our high schools and now in middle schools. That is a way to connect folks without adding a whole layer of infrastructure, and that's working.
Let's move on now to transportation. Much of the focus on transportation in this area is always on the Hillsborough County side. We've certainly seen a lot of fights over there regarding the transportation tax. St. Pete obviously has its challenges as well. Ken, you mentioned them multiple times already tonight. Give me your most impactful strategic initiative for alleviating some of the transportation issues here, including making public transportation available to some of the parts outside of St. Pete.
Well, everything is linked together. And so what we've done with the county, not only have we put aside $100 million for housing, but our plan says that housing should be on transit corridors. And so now you're linking jobs and housing and transportation. The base core bus service is underfunded compared to every other metro except for Tampa. That's why the Hillsborough referendum was so important. It gave them a base to get their bus service up so that it met the need. It runs every 15 or 30 minutes. It runs later at night, runs on weekends. And so both Pinellas and Hillsborough need to get that funding source. Not every community in Pinellas even pays into PSTA, and that's why it's so underfunded. But having that multimodal approach, making sure you've got pedestrian access, bike access, all those things work together, but it has to be coordinated with jobs, transportation, and housing, those three tiers.
Robert, same question for you.
Well, you know, when it comes to how we're going to get public transportation in our area, we need to be cognizant of the fact, first of all, that it handicaps our growth moving forward. Because even, you know, again, they were admittedly far-fetched dreams, but stuff like Amazon moving to our area. You know, we need an educated workforce. We need a public transit system. We do not have one almost whatsoever. Certainly, we're going to need to be multimodal because there has not been general widespread acceptance or usage of public transit traditionally in our area. I certainly respect my opponent's, all of his works on public transit in the past, but I differ from him in that I think we need to look into more multimodal aspect other than just buses. To that end, certainly the Cross Bay Ferry I appreciate and I think is a good option. Stuff like Sky Gondola, which again, I rolled my eyes at it when I first heard it, but wouldn't it be great if we would go off-grid, right? Parallel to the Howard Franklin, and you could have solar panels running the post, generating their own momentum with the cables, and traveling 45 miles an hour back and forth from Tampa. Innovative ideas like that would generate acceptance just based on, first of all, the novelty, but then the true functionality. And of course, we need to look at stuff like looper service. Certainly our buses currently, even though they're omnipresent, the hours are not right. The routes are not frequent enough. So we need to get that right, but we need to leave nothing overlooked. Also encouraging people to walk and bicycle off-grid is going to be a way of the future.
Do we have time for one more question before we go to closings? No, we'll go to closing statements now. I believe you started, Robert, with the opening. So Ken, if you'd like to give your closing statement now.
Evan, I want to thank you, WFLA and the Tampa Bay Chamber for bringing us together. You know, if you're going into heart surgery, you want a surgeon who's actually performed surgery, not just planned surgery. And that's an analogy to what we have here. I have a record of accomplishments, and that's where my endorsements come from, folks that I've worked with on both sides of the bay for justice reform, for transportation, for housing, for community development, real tangible accomplishments that you can see. You can see lives that have been changed, folks that have come out of homelessness, folks who have avoided arrest because of the APAD program working with the sheriff. I think that's important as we move forward, that you have someone that can collaborate. I'm proud to be endorsed by 5 members of the current city council, 5 county commissioners, recommended by the Tampa Bay Times, supported by our firefighters and so many other people, not because I'm a great guy, but because we've worked together to bring effective change. And we need folks that can work with both sides of the aisle. I'm proud that my endorsers look like our community, and that's the basis for moving forward for inclusive progress. If you'd like to know more about my campaign, go to kenwelch.com and join our Partnership for Progress. Thank you for having me.
Robert, your final statement.
Well, first of all, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. You know, this is an important election. We look at turnout results. I guarantee if I walk down Central Avenue right now, at least 80% of people would have an opinion of the current mayor, positive or negative. Yet 27% of people voted in the primary. I'm subscribed to the school of thought that if you don't vote, you can't complain. And I hope that people will consider the options when they go to vote. You know, we were talking about the track record of my opponent, but I think that we need to look at what is truly going to be innovative and what can bring us forward in a positive manner. I have a different viewpoint. I'm also a lifelong native, but insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. My opponent's been in office since I was in the 5th grade. And if we want true progress, we need to look at ideas. I presented a plan for affordable housing, for economic growth in South St. Pete by moving some of our city services there. This will fund the ability to keep our marina public, which I've fought for on council. And my point is, I have these ideas and I want to do them because I want to be a public servant. I don't want to garner a paycheck and create a career out of this. We don't need a 21-year runway. I've done it, I've worked hard, and I plan on bringing things forward regardless of who's backed me, although I have over 30 endorsements myself. I want to do the right thing for the right thing, regardless of any money that's been given to my campaign or any promises that have been made. Robert Blackman, I thank you very much. I hope you'll vote November 2nd.
This concludes the St. Pete mayoral debate presented by the Tampa Bay Chamber. Thank you once again to our candidates, Councilman Robert Blackman and former Commissioner Ken Welch, WFLA News Channel 8 for live streaming this event, and USF St. Pete for hosting us for this important regional conversation. As Robert mentioned, Election Day is November 2nd. Thank you and good night.